Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hey everyone, I'm Case Aiken, and I am so happy to be back on Side Quest today. So thanks to Matt and Jeff for allowing me to come back to continue to gush about a series that had long been fallow, but as of 2022, launched a new entry in the franchise. And while it may not be the best in the franchise, it is certainly an entry. So today I want to talk about Saints Row. So I'm going to make no bones about it. I love the Saints Row series. I've talked about them multiple times on this series, as well as strong-arming my friends to come on the series and talk about how much they love the series. The Saints Row series, for those uninitiated, is what started as a Grand Theft Auto clone that turned into a complete madhouse of fun and well, the thing that sold me on the series was when Ben Yahtzee Crawshaw described it as being disturbingly close to playing a simulation of being a Batman villain. And you know what? That's how I approach this series always. So the series arguably peaked with number 2. And I don't think this one really changes that calculus there. 2 might not be the best of all Saints Row games at any one thing, but it certainly has the best ratio of all those things. It's zany, but not too zany. It's not too hard, but it has a good challenge rating. It has all the fun things you can find if you go really digging, but it's not quite as far as some of the other ones in terms of options, and your abilities and power of action are a lot lower than some of the other ones. This game is arguably trying to get back to that level more or less. 3 is way over the top, and 4 comes so far over the top that it comes back around into just being a different genre of game. And I love them both for different reasons, but Saints Row 2 has been the best of the series, and this one is tied for third place for me. Saints Row 2 remains the best. Saints Row 4, and this one might be controversial for some people who really just wanted it to be a GTA clone, but Saints Row 4 is the closest we've gotten to a good Superman game pretty much ever. So, that's a thing for me there, but it's just a different game wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, the 2022 Saints Row game, which I'm annoyed that they decided just to call it Saints Row, but I get it. It's been a decade since Saints Row 4. There's Gat Out of Hell, which is, was a spinoff of Saints Row 4 and is using the same engine. This one is basically a relaunch that's not continuing the story that had been pursued from Saints Row 1 through Gat Out of Hell, which is effectively Saints Row 5. So this is really Saints Row 6. But you know what? That's all fine. This game is fine. It's more than fine. It's a lot of fun. It's a very fun game with lots of cool options and some really interesting things you can do once you start to unlock some stuff. However, it's infamously glitchy, and that is true. It's been patched a bit, but there's still a good number of glitches, some of which mean you have to restart missions. And it's not very ambitious. Like, it is more Saints Row. I would say it's somewhere between 2 and 3 in terms of tone. You've got some of the crazy sci-fi options that 3 had, but it's not quite so far. And generally speaking, they are more fun than what was available in 3. So that's a pro here. The new Saints Row, well, it would be probably my favorite Saints Row if it wasn't for the fact that there is no story that is worth discussing. It's set up as a very WeWork style startup company kind of situation where you have 3 people, yourself included, who are each members of a different gang. Although in your case, the gang was a private security firm, and then their college boy space friend, although also possibly, I don't know, they might all be banging, who knows. And they all break away from their respective groups and decide to start a new organization after you go through a whole bunch of missions where everyone gets betrayed by their respective gangs. And then you start your criminal enterprise. And I like all of that. And the way it's implemented is generally a pretty fun time that was very compelling for me to try to get pretty much a 100% on the game. There's a few sections that I just was like, I'm just not going to do very well at this, so I'm not going to worry about it. But aside from those, it's not a game that I didn't spend a considerable amount of time in. I went pretty nuts on it. I got a lot of it done, which you kind of have to, because some of the later missions are gate kept, or they're locked out by having enough money. And well, for one thing, while you can just let your passive income stream go, honestly, you kind of just need to do something. Otherwise, you're going to just be waiting for forever. And my Xbox automatically turns off long before it would actually get to the level of passive income that would let me get to those last couple missions. But on that note, the missions, the story mode is fine. The levels are fine. It's just the story is boring and cliche, and it's kind of whatever. It is an excuse to do the story stuff that you would do otherwise. And maybe it's just because you're playing a different boss than you were playing in the previous ones, and you don't quite have the same vibe. And maybe it's just because we've grown up a bit. I kind of didn't need it to have the story. It was enough just to have the excuse of like, yeah, just go nuts. In this game, when you're just going nuts, it does a really good job at that. In fact, one of my critiques of the game is that some of the mini games where you do go nuts, Mayhem in particular, comes in much later in the game than I would prefer. I was like, well, just give us those options now. Like it'll be a lot of fun, but not the end of the world. Saints Row 2022 is a fine entry into the series. And if you enjoy the Saints Row series or Grand Theft Auto style games in general, you owe it to yourself to check it out because it does pretty well. It offers things like hover bikes, hover boards, which play differently, which I was surprised by. You get your standard staple of tanks and vertical takeoff and landing jets. And then most importantly, one of the add-ons in the game is that previous games, you actually could eventually learn how to fully fly. And they got away from that by having you have a flight suit that you can kick on when you're falling a certain distance. And that is actually really fun. And as far as I can tell, looks almost identical in gameplay to the Spider-Man 2 on the current hardware controls. So like shockingly close. And that by itself would be fine because every now and then you would find like a building to jump off or something. But in one of the expansion packs or DLCs or whatever, you can get a gun called a Pain and Gain, where you fire a barbell into whatever and it's attached to a chain. And if you fire it into something, it's like being hit by a car and they get sent in all directions and the chain drags and you can hurt people. You're never really going to use it that way because it's slow. The way you're going to use it is you're going to aim it into space and fire it off, and it is going to suck you up into the air and give you basically free flight once you get it. Now, the downsides of flight is that it's not as fast as some of the vehicles, nor do you have obviously armor or all the other functions. So you're going to end up driving, which is not a thing that you really ended up doing in Saints Row 4. However, it is really fun. It controls very well. It's good. It's a really cool mechanic. And if you're playing this as being a Batman villain, you can get some pretty interesting flight suits that look pretty goddamn super villainous and do some really cool designs. And that's awesome. And then you can land and then, get on your hoverboard and go over water because you've got power. Yeah, it's cool. There's a lot of cool things in this game. Like you can get different materials to make weapons out of so they can feel like they're energy constructs, like you're a Green Lantern, or they're blinged out and all made of gold, which is pretty cool. The costume options are great. You can change your costume freely wherever you are, which is awesome. In fact, the only thing you really can't do wherever is you can't change your weapon loadout at any given time, which is probably a way of preventing you from having infinite ammo for anything. So that's anything else you can just change on the fly, which is great. The whole hub for the game is set up through like an iPhone style kind of like app system, which makes a lot of sense and it works pretty well. They really lean into like gig economy stuff with it and like the modern tech space, which again, interesting. The town is very like southwestern. It might be a Phoenix type. It might be in like an Austin type or something like that. It's probably like some Breaking Bad inspired. It's a different type of town than we see in most Grand Theft Auto style games. It's not like it's a city, but it's not like a big East Coast metropolis. It's not a Miami and it's not a Vegas or an LA. It's like I said, it's feels more like an Austin, and that's cool. Like it's nice that they're doing something different. The main character is canonically female. Obviously, you can change all your stats for that, but it certainly. The story works in that way, and it works really well that way, and is a different kind of boss than the one you've played previously, which is also kind of fun. I don't fucking care about her friends. I'm sorry. There's like this big through line about them being like her best friends that will stick with her for forever, and they're fine. Like the characters are fine. There's nothing like innately wrong with any of them. It's just while there are moments where it's like, well, this rings true, it feels too much like mundane actual friends as opposed to you have a criminal empire together. Not more in that the stuff you're getting up to later in the game as like friend activities kind of just feel the same as you would if you were unemployed, whatevers. And it just doesn't feel like the right scale. Like I feel like the relationship should change a little bit over the course of the game. And that basically gets down to the fact that the main game mission is like very clearly rushed. The story, the whole game has like this like rushed kind of vibe. Matt McMuscles did a really good video on it on YouTube. So if you're looking for what happened to Saints Row, check that out. It's a really good one. But the point is, Saints Row 2022 does a lot of things right. It gets a lot of the things that the games in the Saints Row series after 2 got wrong right. It gets some new things wrong, and that's a problem. Like, again, for me, it's Saints Row 2 is my top tier. Saints Row 4 is my second tier, but it's a very different kind of game. And then this is tied with the original Saints Row and Saints Row 3 and frankly, Gat Out of Hell. Like, they all have their own shortcomings to it. And this one, the shortcoming is the actual main campaign. It is fine, but there's no real like interesting story. And that's kind of the same problem that 3 had to a certain degree. Although 3's bigger problem was just that it was just too fucking easy. Like eventually you get too many upgrades, and like it feels weird turning off the upgrades that you've earned at that point, but you need to. Otherwise the game is too easy. It's like, it's boring to play. You can just jump out of buildings, no flight suit, no parachute, and just like land head first and get up and be fine. And like, that's not exciting. And even though you're fighting S.H.I.E.L.D. and I don't know, 3's too memeish. It's too trendy for the era it came out in. This one is also in the same ballpark of being like a little too trendy, but the bigger issue is that it's more that it is of a very rushed and kind of glitchy production schedule. The original Saints Row is kind of tied for it, where it's got an amazing voice cast. It's got Keith David, which, that's huge right there. It's got a really good foundation to a really good series, but it's raw, and it is just a GTA clone in the way that the others kind of go far enough that it doesn't really bother anyone that that this started off as a GTA clone. Like, it's not Driver. Like, we're talking about a series that has some really good pedigree to it. It has some really good vocal casts that have lent their performances, and this one is keeping up with all that. It's just the one that you would buy for the Xbox Series X versus the one for Xbox 360. Like, there's a significant hardware improvement. It's a really good looking game with some really cool aesthetics that have really fun missions and really fun just abilities to go around and mess up people. Like, it's a GTA clone. Go fuck up some people. That's a fun part about doing it. Like, the physics engine is really nice. Very early on, you get the upgrade for your vehicles to allow for tow chains, and you can just grab other vehicles and use them as wrecking balls. My main motorcycle, I had a tow chain, and I would just spin out and strike other cops or gang members or whatever with like their own monster truck or something. And it was the funniest shit. And I'm not sure if the earlier Saints Row games could have handled that physics engine. To a certain degree, this kind of feels like an actual game using Goat Simulator. So yeah, I would say if you like this style of game and you've heard some things about it, it's patched enough that you're not really going to be that mad. It's got some fun mini games like a LARPing kind of side quest that can give you some pretty cool items. Unfortunately, all the really special items you end up just never using once you get the pain in game, because it's so important to your movement to be able to fly whenever you want, because cars break very easily in this game. So you might end up without like a vehicle. And unfortunately, most of your favorites cannot be summoned for you by the way that like a regular motorcycle or car can be. All of the like really special items you have to go to a garage or to your headquarters to get, and that actually kind of makes them like less likely to be used, just because like most of the time I'm like, I need my motorcycle, and I just summon my motorcycle to me. And so as a result, because you can always fly at that point, you'll just do that a lot. That said, the flight mechanics are great and the missions are really cool. And I'm really happy with this game overall. I do wish that some of those side missions that you get later in the game came earlier. There's a lot of like things that are gated by money, and that's kind of annoying. And I wish that there was a benefit to strategically taking over your territory. As it is, as far as I could tell, there isn't. Like, you could you could seize whatever chunk of territory, and there, like, even if it's completely surrounded by hostile power, like, it doesn't seem to really be affected. There's no like fight to reclaim or fight to like hold your spaces, which is kind of a bummer, because like there's this whole map of taking over your criminal empires, and it would be nice if as you locked down your territories, you really felt like you had to continue to defend this area, as opposed to just initially once you've taken it over, you've taken it over. That's the only real bummer. beyond the story mode being kind of lackluster, and it's fine. Like the thing is, you'll end up doing so many missions of the bonus and side quest and DLC varieties mixed in there that you kind of lose the thread. But that's not weird for a GTA clone anyway. The Saints Row games always have usually had like 3 separate story modes that were going on simultaneously for each of the gangs that you're dealing with. And this one slightly less so. It's actually slightly more coherent, but it is what it is. And in that regard, it is pretty fun. It was fun enough that like I said, aside from just acknowledging I am terrible at the insurance fraud minigame, and I just knew I wasn't going to be able to do it. I tried to play it initially, and I've never been good at that. I've never been good at that at earlier versions. I don't know why it's so popular. Give me the mayhem mini games. Give me all the ones where you have to go assassinate people or all that. But the one where you have to get hit by a car and then land into another car at just the right angle with weird ragdoll physics. It's fun, but the scores that they require are just way too high, and I'm just not good enough at that one. But aside from that, I goddamn cleared the entire goddamn game. I've played this thing to death, and it consumed me for a solid month and a half. And so I'm saying that if you are looking for something like that, this is pretty good. You can make just about any supervillain you'll want. You might be compelled to make their color scheme be purple themed because that's the Saints. But aside from that, you can make most things. You can have your character be a melee character, which is a big deal in one of these games. You can have Thor's hammer come back to you. You're not going to use it because, again, you're going to be using the pain and gain instead. But hey, the pain and gain's pretty cool. And the flight mechanics are really cathartic. Weirdly, the Saints Row games, when they've had flying abilities, not like helicopters, but the ability to fly, in 4 and in Gat Out of Hell and in this, it's very soothing. Gat Out of Hell was one of my games where I would just go and fly. And that was an amazing use of time. I would just enjoy flying in that game, not flying to stuff, just going for a flight. And you can do that to a lesser extent here. You can bounce off of people, and you can hitch rides on cars to keep the flight going. And those are all really cool. But ultimately, the pain and gain is really necessary for long-term flight. And because it is cathartic and soothing to do, I would recommend it just to get to that point where you're I'm just going to scope around this weird fake Austin crime scene situation. And that's cool. It's a fun game. It's a game where you can tailor the challenge rating to your liking. This might just be a quality of life update that modern video games are getting across the board, but I, being not a huge modern gamer, haven't seen this before, but you can actually set the difficulty for all kinds of things internally in the game. So you can set it, if you're terrible at missions that have a time limit, you can set it so that those are easier from the time limit standpoint. But if you are really good at gunplay, you can make the enemies tougher. And that's really cool that you can get that granular level of difficulty there. It feels like some games do that by being hard and then giving you power-ups that you can turn on and off. But this is the first game where it was really, here's an acknowledgement of what do you like as a player? And I thought that was really nice too. And once you set it, you kind of forget about it. But ultimately, it is a huge boon to why this game was fun for me, because I can make the things that I find fun, the things that I actually was doing more of and more challenged by. And that's really cool. A lot of games don't do that and have been ruined because of it. You aren't going to feel like you accomplished a lot at the end of it all. But in terms of just being hey, this was fun to do, there you have it. So yeah, check out Saints Row. And then you should check out the stuff that I work on with Certain POV. So I am another podcaster on the Certain POV network. I've got 2 shows that are actively running right now. Men of Steel, which is a Superman and Superman adjacent show that I co-host with J. Mike Folson. And then Another Pass, which is a movie analysis show that I co-host with Sam Alisea. So check out both of those wherever you get podcasts, and then all the video stuff for Certain POV Media. I have my fingers in those. So check all of that out, and check out our Discord, which you can find a permanent invite link to at our website at certainpov.com. Come hang out, come chat. It's been a blast seeing all the people who've been coming on board recently. Really, really positive conversations. I can't speak highly enough about it all. But yeah, otherwise just happy gaming.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay!
Hey, Nerf herders.
You sure you want to go with that?
Hey, everyone.
There we go. More inviting.
Have you ever had a movie that you really wanted to love, but something holds you back?
Or one that you did love in spite of a flaw?
Well, I'm Case Aiken.
And I'm Sam Alisea.
And on Another Pass, we sit down with cool guests to look at movies that we find fascinating.
But flawed.
And we try to imagine what could have been done when they were made to give them that little push.
We're not experts. We just believe in criticism.
Constructive criticism.
Sure.
So come take another pass at some movies with us.
And every now and then, we can celebrate movies that did it on their own, too.
You can find us at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pass it on.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.